K9 German Shepherds discover forest ranger chained to a tree. What happens next will break your heart. Sasha's life was never meant to be this lonely. After losing her brother in a tragic accident, she found herself isolated from the world. The grief was heavy, swallowing her up like a deep, dark hole. Every day felt the same, quiet, empty, and painful. The only place where she felt some peace was in the vast forest near her home. It was her escape, the one place that could help silence the constant echo of her thoughts. So she often took long walks, hoping the fresh air and the sound of rustling leaves could somehow ease the ache in her heart. But today, something felt different. Accompanying her on these walks were Axel and Kuno, two retired K9s who had once served in the police force. They had been with her for over a year now, and though their pasts were filled with hard memories and loss, they had found a new purpose with Sasha. Both dogs had lost their original handler in a tragic incident, and they carried that pain with them in their loyal eyes. But to Sasha, they weren't just dogs, they were family. Axel, the older, wiser one, always stayed close by her side, while Kuno, the younger of the two, was quick to alert her of anything unusual. Both had military-grade instincts and training, making them the perfect companions. They were always watchful, always ready. The bond they shared with Sasha went beyond words. They understood each other without saying a thing. It was a normal afternoon as Sasha and the dogs walked through the quiet forest. The sun filtered through the trees, casting shadows that danced on the ground. Sasha sighed, letting herself relax for a moment. But then, Axel and Kuno froze. Their heads snapped up, their ears twitching, and their eyes darted toward the deep woods ahead. Without warning, they began to growl, a low, rumbling sound that sent a chill down Sasha's spine. She looked around, her heart racing. The forest, usually peaceful, now seemed unnaturally still. Axel and Kuno's growls grew louder, and suddenly they bolted into the woods, faster than Sasha could follow. Confused and frightened, Sasha hesitated for a moment. What was going on? Her heart pounded as she ran after them, unsure of what she would find, but knowing she couldn't leave them alone. The dogs, with their sharp senses and unmatched loyalty, were chasing something dangerous. She pushed through the thick brush, her mind racing with fear. What could it be? What had they found? Sasha's heart pounded as she pushed forward through the thick forest, her legs aching, but her fear driving her. Axel and Kuno ahead of her moved with purpose, their bodies tense as they drew closer to the source of the disturbance. Then they stopped abruptly. Sasha's breath caught in her throat as her eyes followed their gaze. What she saw next made her stomach churn. A man, bloodied and battered, was chained to a tree. His body was slumped against the rough bark, his skin pale and covered in dirt. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and labored. The sight was enough to make Sasha freeze in place, her chest tightening with horror. The dogs whined softly, their instincts telling them the situation was dire. The man was weak, clearly having been there for hours, maybe longer, left to die. His clothes were torn, his face bruised and swollen. Blood, old and fresh, stained the ground beneath him. The forest, which had always felt like a sanctuary, now seemed like a twisted trap, holding this man in its depths. As Sasha knelt down beside him, the reality of the situation set in. She reached for the man's arm, careful not to startle him. His face, though bruised, seemed familiar. Then her eyes caught a glimmer of metal on his chest, a ranger badge. With trembling hands, she lifted it gently, her eyes scanning the name engraved on it, Elias Rowan. Sasha's breath caught in her throat. Elias Rowan, a forest ranger known for his dedication to the land, a protector of these woods. But now he was a victim of an unimaginable cruelty. He barely stirred, his eyes fluttering open for a moment before closing again. It was clear. This man had been left to die here, abandoned by those who had bound him to this tree. The dogs stood guard around him, Axel's protective gaze never leaving the man, while Kuno's ears stayed alert, as though watching for any sign of danger. Sasha's eyes scanned the ground, trying to make sense of what had happened here. Her heart sank as she noticed the claw marks gouged into the nearby trees and the disturbed earth around the man's feet. The soil was torn up, as if something had struggled violently in the area. Sasha's breath quickened as she noticed the patches of old blood scattered on the ground. Some still fresh, others dried. This was no accident. There had been a fight. Elias Rowan had fought for his life, and something, had left him here to suffer. The realization hit Sasha like a wave. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was deliberate. Whoever had done this had planned it, had hunted this man down and left him for dead in the woods. The claw marks on the trees weren't from any animal Sasha knew, and the blood, both fresh and old, told a story of a violent struggle. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight against something far darker. Her heart raced, and the dogs growled low in their throats, their bodies tensed. Sasha didn't know what had happened here, but one thing was certain. This was just the beginning of a much larger, terrifying mystery. As Sasha gently attempted to revive Elias, her mind began to race. His current state was so far from the man he must have been. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to piece together the story. The forest was his home, and everything about him radiated a deep, unwavering love for nature. She remembered hearing about him from local news reports, stories of his tireless dedication to the forest, his work with endangered species, and how he would often risk his life to report illegal activities taking place within the dense, secretive woods. Elias had been known for his passion. He wasn't just a forest ranger. He was a protector, someone who felt the pulse of the land beneath his boots. His bond with the creatures that roamed the forest was unmatched, and it wasn't unusual for him to disappear for days at a time, following leads or tracking poachers. People spoke of him with respect, but also with a sense of awe. To live in the woods day in and day out, protecting the creatures and the environment. Elias was more than just a man to these woods. He was its guardian, its voice. The dogs circled around him, sensing his distress. Sasha's hands trembled as she applied pressure to a wound on his arm, hoping to stop the bleeding. She looked at Axel, who seemed to understand the urgency, and whispered, "We'll get him back. We have to." As Elias stirred slightly, a flashback of his life started to unfold in Sasha's mind. The image was vivid. She could see Elias walking through the thick woods, his expression determined, his eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. He had been investigating something dark, something most people couldn't even imagine. The illegal logging operation that was ravaging the heart of the forest, and worse, an underground network of animal smuggling. Elias had always kept quiet about the details of his investigations, but rumors had been circulating for months. He had started to connect the dots between the logging companies and poachers who were decimating endangered species. His attempts to shut down the illegal operations made him powerful enemies, people with money and influence who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Despite the threats, Elias had kept pushing forward. He wasn't one to back down from a challenge, especially when the lives of innocent animals and the future of the forest were at stake. He worked quietly but relentlessly, collecting evidence, documenting his findings, and sending anonymous reports to authorities. But those in power weren't so keen on his discovery. Little did he know, they were already watching him, waiting for the right moment to silence him. Sasha's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp sound of the forest wind whispering through the trees. She realized that Elias' disappearance wasn't just a random event. It was part of something bigger. Days before he was found chained to that tree, Elias had filed a confidential report, a final, urgent plea for help. In it, he wrote that he believed he was being followed, watched, and that his life was in imminent danger. But no one took him seriously. His colleagues had dismissed his fears as paranoia, his warnings as overreaction. The authorities had brushed off his claims, chalking it up to the stress of his dangerous job. But Elias knew the stakes. He knew his time was running out. And now Sasha understood. He had become a target, a man who had dared to dig too deep into a web of corruption and greed. The realization hit Sasha like a jolt of electricity. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It wasn't just about helping a man chained to a tree. It was about uncovering the truth, a truth that had been buried in the shadows for far too long. The forest had secrets, and Elias had paid the price for exposing them. As Elias lay weak, his breathing shallow, Sasha made a silent vow to herself and to him. She wouldn't let his work die with him. The truth had to come out. The dogs seemed to understand too, their eyes focused on her as if urging her to take action. The silence in the forest grew thick, but Sasha knew this was just the beginning. As Sasha continued to tend to Elias, Axel and Kuno grew restless. They circled around him, sniffing the air, their sharp eyes scanning the forest. Sasha noticed their sudden change in behavior. Tail rigid, ears upright, their bodies tense. It was as if they were sensing something dangerous. Then Axel suddenly bolted off, his nose leading him through the dense underbrush. Kuno followed quickly, growling low and deep in his chest. Sasha's heart raced as she called after them, but they were already far ahead, their instincts kicking in. She followed, adrenaline pumping through her veins, her mind running wild with questions. What had triggered them? In the thick of the forest, the dog stopped abruptly. Axel lowered his nose to the ground, sniffing an old torn piece of cloth. His growl intensified, deepening in tone as if warning of an old familiar threat. Kuno joined him, sniffing the cloth, and then looking up at Sasha with a growl that seemed to reverberate through the air. The cloth had been here for a while. Dirt and weathered edges told of its age. But the dog's violent reaction was clear. This scent, it wasn't new. It wasn't something they could forget. Sasha stood frozen, piecing the puzzle together in her mind. The dogs knew this smell. It was an enemy they had once tracked, a figure from their past that had left a deep imprint on their instincts. Her heart skipped a beat as a sense of dread crept up her spine. The scent was that of danger, and it pointed directly to a person, someone who had caused them trouble before. Sasha looked down at the dogs, trying to comprehend what was happening. Axel and Kuno weren't just any dogs. They were highly trained K9 officers with years of experience tracking criminals, sniffing out illegal activities, and protecting their handlers. But as she thought back to their time in the force, a chilling memory surfaced. Axel and Kuno had once been part of a team that had hunted down a notorious poacher, a man who had escaped justice years ago. The poacher, known only by his alias, had been involved in the illegal hunting of endangered species, devastating the wildlife in the region. Axel and Kuno had tracked him relentlessly for months, their noses leading them through the most difficult terrains. But somehow the poacher managed to escape, slipping through their grasp just when they were close to catching him. The case had haunted their handlers, and the poacher's sudden disappearance had left a bitter taste of unfinished business. The dogs had been disappointed but resolute. They knew the poacher was still out there somewhere. Sasha now understood the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't just about saving Elias anymore. It was about stopping a dangerous criminal who had been on the run for far too long. And now Axel and Kuno, the very dogs who had once hunted him, were telling her that the poacher had returned. Sasha's mind raced as she processed the weight of the moment. The poacher, who had once slipped away, was now back. The dogs' instincts told them everything they needed to know. The scent they had encountered before had resurfaced. The poacher had returned to the forest, and this time, he wasn't just hiding in the shadows. He was back, and he was connected to the very people Elias had been trying to protect the forest from. For the dogs, this was more than a simple tracking mission. It was personal. They had unfinished business, and they weren't going to let this man slip away again. The bond between the dogs and their former handler, the bond between Sasha and the dogs, grew stronger in that moment. There was a shared purpose, a shared mission to see justice served for the forest, for Elias, and for all the creatures who had suffered at the hands of this poacher. Sasha knelt down next to Axel and Kuno, their eyes focused on her with unwavering loyalty. She could see the fire in their eyes, the determination in every movement. They were ready to finish what they had started, and Sasha had no choice but to follow them. With Elias in her care and the forest in immediate danger, they had to act quickly. The dogs led her deeper into the woods, their instincts sharp and their focus unwavering. Sasha knew one thing for sure. Their hunt for the poacher was only just beginning, and this time, they weren't going to let him escape. Back at the makeshift camp, with Elias now resting, Sasha searched through the materials he had been carrying. Her fingers brushed over the battered leather of his field notebook. Its pages were worn, but it felt like the key to unraveling everything that had happened. She opened it carefully, her heart pounding as she read Elias's last entries. At first glance, it appeared to be the typical notes of a forest ranger, observations on wildlife, weather patterns, and tracking reports. But as she flipped through, her eyes caught something far more disturbing. Maps of the forest with sections highlighted in red, names of individuals marked with thick X's, and strange permits for land development that seemed out of place. She paused, taking in the meaning of what she was seeing. The permits were for land clearing, but not for the reasons Elias had been told. These were designed for large-scale timber extraction, and the people involved were not just loggers, they were connected to high-ranking politicians and business tycoons. Sasha's stomach turned. This wasn't just a case of illegal logging, it was a deep-seated network of corruption. Elias had been tracking something far larger, something far more dangerous than just a few criminals. As she sifted through the pages, Sasha found a collection of notes about wildlife, specifically about endangered species that were being captured, transported, and sold. Her heart sank as she realized what this meant. The timber company wasn't just destroying the forest for profit. They were also illegally capturing and trading animals, pushing them into extinction in the name of greed. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the truth was more chilling than Sasha could have imagined. The forest was no longer just a sanctuary. It had become the focal point of a powerful syndicate, a timber company backed by corrupt politicians and wealthy investors, had been using the land as their personal playground, exploiting the natural resources without a second thought for the consequences. The documents pointed to a coordinated effort to clear large swathes of the forest, taking advantage of the poor legal oversight. Whole sections of the forest had been chopped down to make way for private projects, and the wildlife that was caught in the crossfire was being sold for lucrative black market deals. Exotic birds, rare animals, and even endangered species were all part of a secret trafficking operation that few knew about, until Elias stumbled upon it. With his deep knowledge of the forest and his commitment to protecting its creatures, Elias had become a thorn in the side of these criminals. He was gathering evidence to expose the extent of their corruption. Maps, photos, receipts. He had it all. But there was one thing they couldn't afford: Elias revealing the truth. Sasha felt a cold shiver run through her as she pieced this together. The forest wasn't just a battleground for endangered animals. It was a battleground for power, money, and influence, and the timber company and its backers would stop at nothing to protect their profits. They had been watching Elias for some time, monitoring his every move. They knew he was getting closer to exposing everything, and that's when they had taken action. The pages of Elias' notebook began to reveal more disturbing details as Sasha kept reading. It became clear that Elias wasn't the first one to be targeted. Several of his colleagues, other rangers who had raised their voices against the illegal land clearing, had mysteriously disappeared or been reassigned to far-off posts. Some had even been threatened. It was a pattern that seemed all too familiar. Anyone who stood in the way of the corrupt network had to be silenced, one way or another. Elias had written about one of his closest friends, another ranger, who had been reassigned after speaking out about the illegal activities in the forest. The man had been given a new, dangerous assignment, far from the forest he loved, in an area where he could do no harm to the syndicate's plans. Others had simply vanished without a trace, but Elias had held on, believing that his work could make a difference, that the truth would come to light. He had gathered proof, enough to bring down the whole operation. But Elias was smart, too smart for them to let him continue. Before they could let him expose the truth, they made sure to take him out of the equation. Sasha looked down at the journal, her heart aching for the man who had sacrificed so much for the greater good. It wasn't just about the animals or the forest anymore. It was about fighting for what was right, even when the system was stacked against you. Elias had believed in that fight right up until they got to him. Sasha clenched her fists, the weight of everything hitting her like a wave. The injustice of it all, the betrayal, the lives lost in the pursuit of power. She couldn't let Elias's death be in vain. She had to expose the truth, not just for him, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of these powerful people. With the dogs by her side, Sasha made a vow to finish what Elias had started. The evidence was all there, and it was up to her to bring the truth to light and to make sure the people responsible would be held accountable for the lives they had destroyed. The moon hung low in the sky as Sasha, Axel, and Kuno moved quietly through the dense forest. The night was alive with the sounds of distant rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. But Sasha's mind was focused on one thing: finding the criminals who had been exploiting the forest for their own gain. They had to be stopped, and tonight, she was determined to get the evidence that would put them away for good. Her heart raced as she looked down at the map Elias had left behind, pointing her towards a remote clearing known for its illegal activity. She couldn't do this alone, but with Axel and Kuno by her side, she felt an unspoken strength. These were no ordinary dogs. Their instincts and training had prepared them for moments like this. As they approached the clearing, Sasha paused to pull out a small hidden camera she had set up for the mission. It was a risky move, but she had no other choice. The evidence had to be irrefutable. The dogs sniffed the air, their ears twitching as they locked onto the scent of something foul. Sasha's heart skipped a beat as she turned on the camera. The footage would capture everything: the cages filled with rare animals, their eyes wide with fear, and the unmistakable sound of chainsaws tearing into the heart of the forest. This wasn't just illegal logging anymore. It was wildlife trafficking, the kind of thing Elias had been trying to expose. Sasha's hand shook slightly as she pressed the record button. She had what she needed. Now it was time to leave before anyone noticed. As they turned to leave, a sudden noise in the distance made Sasha freeze. The sound of footsteps crunching against the forest floor. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The same men who had attacked Elias were closing in, likely searching for the evidence she had just uncovered. They had found her. Before Sasha could react, Axel and Kuno's ears shot up, their bodies tense, ready for action. The dogs growled low in their throats, a sound that sent chills down Sasha's spine. She quickly grabbed a rock and threw it in the opposite direction to distract the men, buying them a few precious seconds to prepare. The men appeared through the trees, their faces twisted in anger, and their hands gripping weapons. The first man raised a gun, aiming it directly at Sasha. But in an instant, Axel lunged forward, knocking the man off balance. The weapon flew from his hands and Axel was on top of him, a fierce protector driven by loyalty and instinct. The second man reached for a knife, but Kuno was quicker. With a swift move, Kuno lunged at him, sinking his teeth into the man's arm. The man screamed in pain, stumbling back, trying to free himself. Kuno wouldn't let go. His teeth dug deeper, cornering the man against a tree, immobilizing him. Sasha's breath was caught in her throat. The dogs were handling the attackers, but she knew this wouldn't end without more bloodshed. She needed to act fast before more of them showed up. With her heart racing, Sasha took a deep breath and quickly sent a distress signal with her phone, her hands shaking as she typed the coordinates. She had no idea how long the dogs could hold off the attackers, but she knew that if she didn't get help soon, things would turn deadly. Moments later, the sound of sirens pierced through the stillness of the night. The criminals hadn't expected backup, and as the flashing lights appeared on the horizon, the men began to panic. Sasha could see their fear as they realized they were no longer in control. The authorities arrived just in time. Police officers jumped out of the vehicles, weapons drawn, and quickly apprehended the attackers, handcuffing them one by one. The dogs, still on alert, backed off as the criminals were taken into custody. Sasha let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. It was over. The corrupt syndicate that had been poisoning the forest was finally exposed. And thanks to Elias's bravery, Axel and Kuno's unwavering loyalty, and her own courage, justice was served. As the criminals were driven away, Sasha stood in the clearing, staring at the remnants of the destruction they had left behind. The animals were freed, the forest would heal, and the truth would finally be heard. Axel and Kuno stood by her side, their eyes still scanning the darkness. But Sasha knew that for tonight, their mission was complete. The weeks passed, and as the days grew warmer, so did the sense of peace that had been restored to the forest. Elias, though physically scarred, was mentally unbreakable. Slowly, with the help of medical care and the unwavering support of his community, he recovered from the brutal assault that nearly cost him his life. He returned to his ranger duties with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to continue the work he had started, protecting the forest and its creatures from the forces of corruption that had once tried to silence him. The community rallied around Elias, and in a heartfelt ceremony, they honored his bravery and resilience. People from all walks of life gathered at the ranger station, neighbors, fellow rangers, even wildlife enthusiasts, each one there to show their gratitude for Elias' strength. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving, with Elias standing at the center, Axel and Kuno by his side. As the crowd applauded, a tear glistened in Elias' eye, not just for the life he had almost lost, but for the new beginning he had found. He was no longer just a ranger, he was a symbol of hope. His story was one of courage, but more importantly, it was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is light. Elias had survived, and now he was ready to lead the charge in protecting the land he loved. For Sasha, the journey had only just begun. After everything she had witnessed, the bond she had shared with Elias, and the incredible loyalty of Axel and Kuno, her life had transformed in ways she never thought possible. The quiet walks she used to take for solace had turned into a deep commitment to preserving the beauty of the forest. She was offered a job in wildlife protection, an opportunity she couldn't refuse. It was the kind of work that would allow her to dedicate herself fully to the cause Elias had fought for, the cause of safeguarding nature from those who sought to exploit it. Her heart swelled with pride as she accepted the role. She wasn't just protecting the forest for herself, she was protecting it for future generations. And with Axel and Kuno by her side, she felt invincible. She no longer walked in solitude, haunted by the past. Now she walked with a purpose, fighting for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Sasha's transformation wasn't just about a new job, it was about finding her true calling. What started as a journey of grief had blossomed into a powerful movement toward change. She had found the strength to heal, to fight, and to protect. And in the process, she had become a voice for the voiceless. Axel and Kuno, once retired K9s, were no longer just loyal companions. They were heroes. Their acts of bravery had not only saved Sasha and Elias, but had also uncovered a world of corruption that had been hidden for too long. The community recognized their loyalty and courage with a ceremony of their own, awarding them medals for their bravery and dedication. The dogs stood proudly, their fur glistening in the sunlight, their eyes sharp and unwavering. They had served with honor, and now they were legends. The once forgotten K9s who had been abandoned were now celebrated as heroes. They had proven that loyalty was not just about obeying commands, it was about protecting those who needed it most. As the crowd cheered, Sasha looked down at Axel and Kuno, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had become her family, and together, they had done something remarkable. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Their journey was far from over, but Sasha knew as long as they were together, nothing could stand in their way. With the forest healed, the truth exposed, and the heroes recognized, Sasha, Elias, Axel, and Kuno stepped forward into a future filled with promise, purpose, and unwavering hope. The journey of Elias, Sasha, Axel, and Kuno proves that justice may sometimes take longer than we wish, but it is never truly defeated. Their fight against corruption, the betrayal they endured, and the betrayal they uncovered remind us that even in the darkest moments, there is always a glimmer of hope. In the quiet rustling of the trees, in the steadfast loyalty of a dog, nature always finds a way to speak to us. It speaks through the actions of those who love and protect it, and it speaks through those who, like Axel and Kuno, never forget. They didn't just fight for themselves, they fought for the forest, for the animals, and for the truth. Their loyalty and bravery showed us that even in a world full of greed, there is still room for honor, for courage, and for redemption. Sasha's journey, one of loss, healing, and transformation, reminds us that we can all find a new purpose, no matter how impossible it may seem. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes appear when we need them the most. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear from you. Share your own stories of animal loyalty or acts of unseen heroism. Maybe you've experienced the unwavering love of a pet or witnessed an unexpected act of courage that changed your life. Let's honor those who fight for justice, no matter how quiet or unnoticed their efforts may be. Together, we can celebrate the power of loyalty, love, and the strength of the animals who protect us.